How far would you go to save the people you care about? Would you cut off your own toe? Well, Adiris, aka the Plague, did just that. And it didn't go so well. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. This is the story of the Plague. Adiris, the youngest of a family of 7, was left on the steps of the Temple of Purgation in Babylon when she was 5 years old. In order to cope with the abandonment, she held on to the belief that the gods had a plan for her. One god certainly had a plan for her. Adiris lived a life full of servitude in the temple, spending her day tending to gardens and performing ceremonial tasks. At night, she would pray to the gods for some sense of what she was on the earth for. While attending the yearly worshipping of the sea goat, which is the god of water and creation, Adiris would have an experience that would influence her not only as a priestess in this story, but it would lay the groundwork for her character's aesthetic and abilities in Dead by Daylight. During the worship, Adiris walked down the Great Hall swinging a censer that was casting thick black fumes that would reach the towering stone pillars before dissipating. Swinging the censer brought absolute bliss to Adiris, and she felt closer to the gods than she had ever been. After the worship, Adiris would happily take on new duties helping the priest during purification rituals. Outside the high temple walls, a catastrophic plague had resurfaced. The priests were working overtime as cleansings were being performed daily in a futile attempt to stop the plague. It would only take a couple months for the plague to reach the temple, and priests began contracting the disease. With the number of priests able to conduct the ritual slowly dwindling, Adiris would find herself become the only one able to take over. Even though she was a novice, the panic that was setting in within the temple had to be contained. Adiris was set to perform her first purification ritual, but she was anxious. In order to calm her nerves, she decided to visit the priest's sanctuary chamber. She lit some candles in the sanctuary, and when she did, she noticed a mysterious-looking narrow opening at the back side of the room. With a little shimmying, she slid through the narrow gap. Upon entering this opening, she found herself inside a hidden crypt under the sanctuary. Inside, she found a golden statue of a woman adorned with jeweled fingers. Believing it to be a divine sign, Adiris embraced her destiny. Back in the Great Hall, packed with followers, Adiris entered. Everyone bowed down in awe as she made her way to the brick altar and grabbed a silver ceremonial dagger, displaying her ruby-ringed fingers. The followers were struck by the display of luxury and beauty. With her newfound confidence, Adiris began reciting the epic of creation. Suddenly, a woman in the back of the hall collapsed. Adiris quickly made her way to the woman, but it would take no time at all for her to notice the woman's feet covered in black blisters. The plague was here. Without a lick of thought, Adiris lifted her sacred blade and swung it at her own foot, chopping her toe clean off. She held her bloody toe to the gods, offering it to them for the protection of the sick woman. Silence filled the temple, and the followers revered Adiris as their new priestess. Soon, tales of the high priestess of Babylon spread across the city as quickly as the disease. However, Adiris soon began to show signs of infection. Ashamed, she veiled herself and carried a censer to mask the smell of the sickness. Despite her condition, she continued performing rituals and offering blessed sustenance to her followers. In a desperate attempt to appease the gods, Adiris banished herself from Babylon. Accompanied by a few followers, they ventured through the cold woodlands of Urashtu until they could go no further. In a damp cave, they realized the devastating truth. They were all infected with the plague. Adiris laid in a pool of vomit. Her foot was incredibly swollen and had turned black. Adiris, kneeling among her retching followers, offered one last prayer. Black fumes of incense rose into the damp air before being carried off by a chilling breeze. The bodies of Adiris and her followers were never found. Tales of her return circulated, but the fate of the High Priestess of Babylon remains shrouded in mystery. On March 19th, 2019, Dead by Daylight would see its 15th killer introduced into the game in the Chapter 11 DLC, Demise of the Faithful. The Plague is a devout killer character inspired by the story of Adiris, the High Priestess of Babylon. Her unique powers and abilities allow her to keep survivors injured for an entire match, making her one of the strongest killers currently in the game. The plague's primary power is Vile Purge, a stream of infectious bile that she can projectile vomit at survivors and environmental objects. When hit, survivors become infected, causing them to cough and leave a trail of green vomit. As survivors become more infected, they become louder and easier to track, giving the plague an advantage in locating and capturing them. Additionally, infected survivors spread the sickness to other survivors and interactable objects, such as generators or pallets, making it difficult for the survivors to complete objectives without becoming infected themselves. Each time a survivor is hit with Vile Purge, their sickness meter increases. Once filled, they're put into the injured state and suffer from the broken status effect, meaning they can't be healed. Survivors can cleanse themselves at special fountains around the map to remove the broken status effect, but doing so will contaminate the cleansing fountain. The plague can consume the corruption from one of them, temporarily upgrading her Vile Purge to Corrupt Purge. This enhanced ability allows her to directly damage and down survivors with her projectile vomit instead of merely infecting them. The plague also has 3 unique perks that all have a dark religious tone, paying homage to the plague's belief in a higher power that gave her purpose. Corrupt Intervention. At the start of the trial, the 3 furthest generators from the plague are blocked for a short period, slowing down survivor progress and forcing them to move closer to her. Infectious Fright. When the plague downs a survivor, other survivors within her terror radius scream, revealing their locations momentarily. Dark Devotion. Hitting the obsession with a basic attack transfers the plague's terror radius to the obsession for a short time, allowing her to approach other survivors undetected. Earlier in the story, I mentioned that one god in particular had a plan for Adiris. That ancient god is the Entity, and if you've ever wondered what that is, I would highly recommend checking out this video. As always, thank you for your time. I'm Crisper, and I'll see you in the fog.